So, you're in a toxic situationship, but not with a person, with school. You give it everything you have: time, energy, emotions, sleep, and for what? Stress from constant deadlines and homework, guilt whenever you're hanging with friends because you should be studying instead, self-doubt when you spend hours and hours cramming just to get a bad grade, and pain in your butt and back from sitting all day. Of course, this is not Wattpad. So enough is enough. It's time to define the relationship and study smarter and 2 times faster so you can actually live your life and get way better grades in half the time. So the first problem we need to tackle is not being able to actually start. So when it comes to actually starting on schoolwork and sticking to it, the first thing is to realize that the honeymoon phase is overrated. AKA, no, you do not need to wait to start when you're super motivated. It is completely normal for you not to be motivated to study or not love schoolwork, and it does not make you lazy. So the next thing in order to actually get started working is to define the relationship, which is basically there has to be an incentive, because if you just have like, oh, I'm going to just study all the time, every free minute that I have, and it's just like a never-ending Cinderella to-do list, there is genuinely no incentive or motivation to study faster because there is never going to be an endpoint. So that's what I mean by defining the relationship, is what exactly would you need to do today to finally get time off for the rest of the day? What would you need to do this week to get time off the rest of the week? Because that way it does incentivize you to actually get started and actually start working, because you can see the end point and you get that reward and you get that break at the end. So the next tip is to put a ring on it and commit to one method of note-taking. And ideally, the note-taking method would integrate active recall, because that is by far the best memorization technique. So sticking to one method of note-taking is just way more efficient, because you're not going to have one method for this, one method for that. And overall, in this day and age with technology, I highly recommend trying to use a digital note-taking app or a website, because that way is just so much more efficient. And so one of the best ways to have your study time is by using Remnote, the sponsor of today's video, which combines notes, flashcards, and PDFs into one AI-powered tool. All you have to do is search for Remnote, and you can immediately start using its incredible AI features for free without even needing to log in. So you upload your PDFs or videos here, and from that, Remnote's AI instantly generates flashcards that you can use for spaced repetition, active recall, and active learning. You can also ask the built-in AI tutor chat questions about your notes, flashcards, and PDFs when you're confused. And you can even create quizzes from the material and also summaries, and you can view all the different formats with just one click. Remnote also has folders that allow you to organize your notes and files, and it's like Google Docs plus Quizlet in one, where I can make flashcards directly in my notes. For instance, I can just paste an image into the notes and then just drag a box over the parts that I want to be tested on, and then test myself on it. And the best thing is you can not only use Remnote on your laptop, so when you're taking notes in lectures in class, but also on your phone and your tablet as well, so that you can practice on the go. So yeah, be sure to check out and use Remnote free forever, or get a free month of pro from remnote.com/study-to-success. Okay, so now that you've picked and committed to your note-taking method, it's time to actually start. And the way I finally get started is by gaslighting myself into starting, which we usually do anyways when we're procrastinating and claiming that we're going to start tomorrow but never actually start tomorrow. So just do the same thing that you do when you procrastinate, but in the opposite way, where you keep telling yourself, I'm going to just do 5 minutes more. I'm just going to do 5 minutes more. I'm just going to do 5 minutes more, and just keep repeating that over and over again. And of course, in order to be more efficient, we must stay focused, right? So just like a dating app would distract us probably from our relationship if we were constantly looking at other people, it's important to clear the area, turn off your phone if you need to, remove anything that you think could distract you, any notifications. And if you have a problem, which I have, where you suddenly randomly have like these intrusive or very distracting thoughts of like, oh, I need to email this person, or oh, I need to do that, or you randomly start daydreaming about something, or you start thinking about a random problem, get out a notebook or piece of paper and just write down that thought you had, or that email you need to send, or conversation you wanted to have, and get to it later. Just tell yourself, okay, I'll keep working or studying right now and I'll do that stuff later. So that way you don't forget things and you don't feel anxious that you need to do it immediately, but at the same time, it's not going to keep distracting you. Okay, so the next thing is to set your boundaries and expectations for your projects or homework assignments. And many of you have probably heard of Parkinson's Law, which is basically just that the amount of work we have will fill up the amount of time we have. So if we give ourselves 30 days to complete a homework assignment, we'll procrastinate the whole 30 days and complete it within the 30 days. But if we give ourselves 3 hours to complete that homework assignment, then we'll do it in 3 hours. Hence why we tend to procrastinate until right before a deadline, and we do things way more efficiently and fast before a deadline versus when we have weeks to do it. So basically, it's about setting time boundaries, and you can tell yourself, if I complete this task under this amount of time, then I can do XYZ guilt-free. Basically, just giving yourself a reward or incentive to finish things faster. And again, it's really important to define exactly what you expect from yourself today task-wise so that you don't waste 3 hours just planning, or you have zero idea of what you're supposed to be doing and just randomly studying different things without a plan, or doing random homework assignments without a plan. And usually I recommend batching things, so doing similar tasks together. So for instance, if you have a history essay and you have an English essay, you would do the essays first. Then you would do math and science problems together because they're kind of similar and, problem solving and whatnot. So basically just trying to go subject by subject. So love bombing in the case of studying would be our favorite subjects, and we know which ones they are. They're usually the easiest for us. For me, for instance, it would definitely be anything English or writing related first, and really focusing on that and avoiding all the subjects that I didn't like math and science. And so instead, start with the hard stuff first that you dread the most, kind of like eat the frog, and then do the nice, easy love bombing subjects at the end. Because first of all, the hard subjects will take a lot more mental energy and time and drain you, and then when you're already kind of tired after doing them, you can do the easier subjects that don't take up nearly as much mental energy for you and aren't as hard. Okay, so the next tip for studying more efficiently is to study the right things. So how do you know that you're studying the right things? Well, of course, the first thing is to just read the syllabus, because sometimes the teacher literally tells you or writes out what they're looking for and what you should be studying. But if it's not very clear, then definitely after you take a quiz or your first exam, try to remember as many questions as you can from the quizzes and exams. Try to see if they came from the textbook or if they're similar to the textbook, or just what they were based on. Maybe it was on the lecture, or maybe it was on a certain part of the textbook. And that way it will give you a guide for what to do the rest of the semester in that particular class and what to focus on and what the teacher tests you on. The next tip for studying more efficiently is to see the big picture. Just review the back of your textbook for the outline or the lecture outline before diving into all the details, so that you get a general gist of what's going on and it's not nearly as confusing. And it just helps you see the overall view of things more and prep your brain for learning. The next tip is to embrace the slow burn. As we know, rushing into relationships is usually not the best idea, and impatience is often the enemy. So just like with relationships, it's also very important to be a bit patient and take things slowly when you're learning hard or difficult subjects. For instance, a lot of the biggest time wasters for me in school have been when I didn't understand the fundamentals in a math class or in a science class like chemistry, calculus, and I realized I actually didn't understand some of the basic things from pre-calculus or from chemistry 1, and then it was catching up to me, the fact that I didn't understand those more basic concepts and the fundamentals, and then later in the course I was getting progressively more and more confused and lost and getting worse grades. And unfortunately, sometimes in school they really rush through some of those most basic things that are the most important building blocks for math and science or other subjects, and so sometimes for certain subjects it's actually important to take things a lot more slowly and genuinely learn the basics and the fundamentals. Also, remember that communication is key. Just like in relationships, it's also important in school. So if you're ever confused by anything, please ask your teacher if they're nice. If they're not nice, please ask a tutor, or please ask a friend or somebody who's older than you who knows what is going on. But yeah, try to use office hours if you can. Try to ask questions so that things, again, and confusion doesn't build up over time. The next tip is to spice things up when stuff is getting boring. Basically, most of the times textbooks are extremely boring and redundant and not the best at explaining things. So many times I question what was going on in the people's heads when they were writing these textbooks, if they were trying to make the subject as boring as humanly possible, but essentially it does kill your interest in the subject and love of learning. So spice things up with outside resources that are more concise and to the point and make more sense and are genuinely more fun and interesting to watch or read about, like YouTube videos, teacher websites. There's some really great teachers who post their own resources. And if you're ever confused, you can also ask questions to AI or ask it to summarize things or help you find resources. So the next tip is to notice the little things. And the main thing to know here is that retrieval, or forcing yourself to remember things, is the best way to memorize things. So it's not actually consuming and passively reading, it's actually forcing yourself to try to remember stuff or recall. So that could be blurting, which is basically where you just write down everything you remember about a certain subject. It could be flashcards where you're trying to remember and fill in the blanks. But retrieval and recall build connections, not just reading and not just consuming, which is super important to know. And that kind of ties into practice makes perfect, which is just like when you're going on dates a lot and you get experience, and that way you're not sweating buckets on your first dates and you're not blanking and you don't know what to say. It's the same thing with exams, because we definitely want to avoid the situation where we show up on exam day even though we studied a lot, and then we get there and we're sweating buckets and we're blanking and don't remember anything. So definitely do practice exams. Get used to timing yourself, get used to time pressure, try to emulate your exam environment, find a quiet place, go to a library if you need to, maybe, because obviously if you're having trouble with performance on exams, even though you studied a lot, no matter how efficient you are at studying, if you actually can't perform well during a test, then of course that is a huge issue. And in summary, the 5 love languages of studying. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and it will help you end your toxic situationship with school. Bye guys!